She hired him to realign the cylinder of a broken press, and she paid him in coin she could not afford to lose. And she did not know she was paying a marquess. That was the particular cruelty of it. Though no one in Hartwell Cove would have called it cruel just yet. The man who walked up Dock Street to Finch print shop that grey October afternoon with road dust on his coat and a knapsack worn to soft leather owned more of Upper Canada than Rowena Finch would ever stand on. He owned the bank that held her lease, though he did not yet know that himself. He owned a house with a name and 40 rooms and servants who could not quite meet his eye when they spoke to him. He had walked away from all of it with a stick and a good pair of boots, because a man who has only ever been bowed to begins to wonder whether the bowing is for him or for the title pinned to his back like a notice on a church door. His name was Alistair Doyle Thorne, Marquess of Thornfield. To Rowena, he gave the name Alistair Doyle and stopped there and let her fill in the rest with whatever a travelling compositor looked like, and she filled it in gladly because she had a press that printed crooked and a debt she could not discuss in polite company, and she did not have the patience to wonder where a journeyman had learned to stand like that. Remember the coin she counted into his hand that first evening. A day's wages, honest and no more. Remember it, because everything that came after, the wager at the fall fair, the night she showed him the ledger, the morning a Crested carriage rolled up Dock Street, and a stranger said 4 words that took the floor out from under her in front of half the town, all of it grew from that single unremarkable coin. The lie is only one half of what happened at Hartwell Cove. The other half is what Rowena Finch did about it, and that half is the one worth carrying. She had been managing the shop alone for 8 months, which is long enough to learn exactly how a town decides a woman is finished. It did not happen loudly. Hartwell Cove was too polite for loud. What happened was that the print orders for the mercantile notices went quietly to Drummond's shop on the square, and the legal gazette that her husband Bernard had printed every second Thursday went to Drummond's as well. And Mrs. Beaumont at the post office came in one afternoon with a smile like a folded handkerchief, and wondered, very gently, whether Rowena had considered the teaching position at the Girls' Academy in Truro. Rowena thanked her and showed her out. The problem was the cylinder. Bernard had known the press, a Colombian hand press, bought second-hand and nursed for a decade, the way a man knows a horse that has nearly killed him twice. He had known which lever to coax and which roller to distrust, and where the alignment drifted when the weather went damp. When Bernard died of a fever in February, that knowledge went with him. Rowena could set type with her eyes half closed. She had been doing it since she was 12, standing on a box beside her father's composing stick in his Halifax shop. But the cylinder had been slowly talking for 2 seasons, and every sheet that came off the press now ran a fraction of an inch low on the left margin. And a fraction of an inch was, in the printing trade, the difference between a professional shop and an embarrassment. She had tried to fix it herself. She had read Bernard's notes, and taken apart the roller housing, and put it back together 3 times, and achieved nothing except a bruised thumb and a new appreciation for the word futile. Old Jasper, who had set type at Finch's for 11 years, and had the ink-dark fingers to prove it, watched all 3 attempts from the doorway with his arms folded, and the expression of a man observing a weather event he had predicted but not enjoyed. "You could sell to Drummond," he said on the 3rd morning. "I could walk into the harbour," Rowena said. "I'd rather." Jasper's mouth did a thing that was not quite a smile. "Your husband said the same about Drummond." "I know, that's why I said it." Her brother Clem was in the back room sorting leads and whistling something tuneless, oblivious to the arithmetic she had been running in her head since March. The numbers said that without the legal Gazette contract, the shop would last until spring. With it, she had 2 years to rebuild. Drummond held the Gazette contract because his press ran straight and hers ran crooked, and the town had made its entirely reasonable decision. She was still staring at the composing table when the knock came. He came on foot, no horse, no cart, a knapsack over one shoulder, and a coat that had once been good quality, and was now carefully, exactly worn. He stood at the door and waited, which was not what men looking for work usually did. They called out. This one waited to be acknowledged. "You're looking for a compositor's position," she said, It was not quite a question. "I heard you might have work," he said. "Compositing, presswork, mechanical repair." He glanced past her at the press in the back, and something moved across his face. Not the practiced assessment of a man counting hours. Something closer to genuine interest. "The press is broken," she said. "The cylinder's out of alignment, and I've had 2 men look at it, and both of them took their wages and told me to buy a new one. I can't buy a new one. So before you tell me what you're capable of, I'll tell you what the situation is. I'll give you the leads to sort. It's tedious work, and Jasper already thinks it's beneath him. If you last 3 days without quitting, we'll talk about the cylinder. If you quit before that, you've wasted your time, and I've lost 3 days I didn't have. I'm not apologizing for any of it." She held his eyes through this. He had dark eyes and a stillness to his face that she could not read. "Where do you keep the lead cases?" he said. It was a Marquess who asked it. Rowena had no idea. He did not quit after 3 days. By the end of the first week, he had sorted the leads and cleaned the roller journals and asked quietly if he might look at the cylinder housing. She said yes, the way she said everything she was uncertain about. Shortly and without elaboration, then went back to the composing table and watched him from the corner of her eye. What he did with the cylinder took 2 hours and a set of tools he produced from the knapsack that Rowena had never seen in a print shop. They were precision instruments, the kind used in watchmaking or instrument calibration, and when she looked at them, and then looked at him, he said, without turning around, "I've worked on more than presses," and she let it go, because the cylinder was beginning to move the way it was supposed to move, and she was not going to ask questions that stopped that from happening. When the first test sheet came off the press straight, perfectly, cleanly straight, margin to margin, Rowena stood and looked at it for a long moment and did not say anything, because what she felt was too large and too private to say to a man she had known for 8 days. Clem had no such restraint. He let out a whoop that brought Jasper in from the alley, and Jasper looked at the sheet, and looked at the man who had fixed it, and then looked at the ceiling, which was where Jasper directed his more complicated feelings. "Where did you learn that?" Rowena asked later, when the shop was quiet with the smell of ink and the tallow from the lamp. "I had a teacher who believed in precision," Alistair said. "He said most problems that look like broken parts are alignment problems. You haven't broken anything, you've just drifted." She thought about that longer than she meant to. "What do I call you?" "Alistair," he said, "Doyle." The surname came a half-beat slow, the way a man reaches for a name he doesn't normally use. She heard it, filed it away, and said nothing, because the press ran straight and she had a Gazette contract to reclaim. There was a wager in it, as it turned out. The fall fair brought the county's civic printers together for a demonstration run, a tradition Bernard had always entered, and Drummond had always won since Bernard got sick. Alistair was the one who said she should enter. He said it the way he said all his sharp things lightly, as though the idea were obvious, and the only obstacle was whether she'd see it. "If Drummond wins, he wins," Alistair said. "If you win, the whole county watches you win, and you can't buy that." They worked 3 nights straight to make it happen. She and Alistair and Clem, Jasper arriving each morning, and pretending he hadn't been invested. Alistair set type with a speed that made Jasper stop pretending to be unimpressed and actually stare. He knew every point size by feel. He could read her composing stick upside down and correct her setting before she saw the error herself. These were not things a journeyman compositor learned on the road. These were things a man learned in the printing house of a great estate, with a dedicated teacher from an early age, or in a library where the editions ran to incunabula, and the conversation ran to classical languages. Rowena filed all of this in the same place she had filed the precision tools and the half-beat surname, and the fact that when a difficult customer came in speaking French, Alistair answered him in French, and when she raised her eyebrows, he said briefly that he had travelled. She let it go. The press ran straight. That was what mattered. They won the demonstration. They won it by 4 minutes and a print quality that the county surveyor called the finest he had seen from a hand press in a decade. Drummond came to shake her hand afterward with the warmth of a man whose congratulations are a form of surveillance. and he looked at Alistair standing behind her with a measuring expression and said, "I don't believe I know your compositor, Mrs. Finch." "He's not yours to know," Rowena said pleasantly, and moved away before Drummond could find a second angle. That was a good afternoon. Hold on to it, because it is the afternoon that planted three things that would come up later as consequence. The first was Drummond himself. He was a patient man, patient the way water behind a dam is patient, and he had not become the largest print merchant in 2 counties by losing gracefully. He found her before she left the fairground and said, warmly and without emphasis, that the lease on the Finch building came up for renewal in November, and he was the senior partner in the property syndicate that held it, and he did hope the fall's spirited showing had not distracted anyone from the figures. He smiled while he said it. He was excellent at smiling. The second was a man at the edge of the crowd, who Alistair noticed before she did. Alistair went still. She felt it before she saw it. A sudden quiet in the man beside her, like a candle flame going flat before it goes out. He turned his face away, put himself behind her shoulder, and did not look up again until the man, well-dressed, passing through, carrying the look of someone from away, had moved on. She saw all of it. She stored all of it. The drawer was getting full. The third thing was the dance. She hadn't meant to. Clem pulled her in and the music was lively, and Alistair held out his hand with a dry look that dared her, and she took it because you cannot, in front of everyone who doubted you all year, be seen to be afraid of a country reel. They were clumsy at first, and that was fine. That was tired people being briefly foolish on a good evening. Then the fiddle changed to something slower, the kind of measure she had heard once at a government house reception, and for perhaps a dozen bars, Alistair stopped being a journeyman compositor. His hand changed on her back, his posture changed. He led her across the boards with a certainty that knew exactly where her weight was and exactly where it was going, and it was like dancing with someone who had crossed great rooms under chandeliers and thought nothing of it. She felt it run up her arm like cold water and looked up into his face and saw him see her see it. He went clumsy again, on purpose, and made a joke of his own feet, but the thing had been shown. They stopped close together with the fiddle still going and the October smell of the fairground all around them and the half-inch of air between their faces, and Rowena thought, clearly, I am about to let this happen, and was glad of it. Clem arrived at speed, wanting money for the pie stall. The moment broke. She walked home beside Alistair an hour later, the harbour dark and the fair behind them. "I don't know who you were before Hartwell Cove," she said, keeping her eyes on the road. "A man doesn't fix a cylinder with watchmaker's tools and dance like that, and flinch from a stranger in a crowd unless there's a before he's sealed over. That's your right. But I find I don't want to dig for it." She made herself say the rest of it. "So whatever it is, don't make me regret not asking. That's all. Just don't make it something I'd have to regret." She felt him weigh it. She felt the truth climb right to the edge of him and step back. "There's nothing back there worth your regret," he said. She believed him because she needed to. The month that followed was the best month she could remember in years. The Gazette contract came back to Finch's. 3 merchants switched their notices from Drummond's. Jasper began arriving 20 minutes early, which was his version of joy. Clem learned to set display type, and talked about it at supper every night with the particular intensity of a 16-year-old who has found the thing he's good at. And Alistair listened to all of it with a patience that Rowena, watching from across the table, found hard to account for in a man with no apparent reason to care about the progress of a printer's apprentice. He had never been wanted as a man. He thought this, lying awake in the small room she had made him above the shop, rather than send him across town to the boarding house. He had been wanted as a fortune and as a title, and as an answer to other people's financial problems, but no one in 32 years had wanted him because of the way he was when he thought no one was counting. Rowena Finch did not know he had anything. She wanted the man who had aligned her cylinder and taught her brother to set type, and argued with her about leading widths with a seriousness she found oddly moving. And Alistair found that he would have given Thornfield the 40 rooms and the income and the whole weight of the title, to go on being only that man. He should have told her. He knew it even then. She showed him the ledger on a night near the end of October. She hadn't meant to, but the November renewal was 2 weeks away, and the figures had been waking her at 3 in the morning, and he found her at the composing table with the books open and her face doing the tight, contained thing it did when she was managing something she could not manage. He pulled out the other chair and said, "Show me," and she turned the books around and let another person see the true shape of things for the first time since Bernard died. Drummond held the building lease through a syndicate he chaired. He could set the renewal price at whatever the market would bear, and what the market would bear for the only print shop in Hartwell Cove. Now that the shop was winning Gazette contracts again, was considerably more than Rowena could pay. It had been his plan all along. Let her struggle. Let her fix the shop up, prove the value of the location. Then, when the lease came due, price her out or buy her out at a fraction of what the business was now worth. "There," she said, when he'd read it. Her voice was flat. "Now you know why I'm not asleep. I've been carrying this since March, and I don't know why I showed it to you except that I'm tired of carrying it by myself." "Because you've been carrying it alone too long," he said. "And because you're not someone who asks, and this is the closest you'll get to it." Here is where Alistair made the choice that cost them everything, and he made it out of love, which is the worst reason for a ruinous choice, because it feels exactly like virtue while you're making it. He could have told her. The truth was right there. 3 sentences, simple as correcting a typo. "I am the Marquess of Thornfield. Drummond's lease is nothing to me. Let me buy it tonight." He held the sentences in his mouth and did not say them, because he knew, with the clear, cold accuracy that had always let him read a room faster than the room was ready to be read, exactly what would happen if he did. She would refuse it. This was a woman who had refused the town's sympathy and the academy position and every polite suggestion that she was finished. She would not take a marquess's money across a midnight table, not from a man she had hired with honest coin, and she would send him down the road by morning. So he wrote instead to his man of business, Alderton, through a private channel, and told him to buy the building lease quietly through agents in Halifax, anonymously, at whatever price, no name attached, no word sent back. He told himself it was for her pride. Some of it was, the rest was for the table and the lamp, and the chair he could not make himself push back from. What he said aloud was the truest thing he had said since he walked up the lane. "I have spent my whole life," he said slowly, "in rooms where everyone knew what I was worth, and no one knew me at all. This is the first place I've felt like a person, rather than an account balance someone else was running. I don't want to lose it." He looked at her. "Whatever happens with the lease, I need you to know that." It was honest. It was also wrapped around the largest omission he had ever permitted himself. And Rowena heard only the honesty. She came around the table and kissed him, and he kissed her back like a man who had forgotten what solid ground felt like and had just found it again. And for a while the ledger and Drummond and November were a long way away. 3 weeks later, Drummond's letter arrived. He had discovered someone was inquiring after the lease. He was a patient man, but not a stupid one, and an anonymous buyer sniffing at a property he'd waited years to leverage told him it was worth more than he'd thought. Rather than sell, he moved to terminate the tenancy entirely, citing a subletting clause Bernard had signed years ago in a tired hour, and giving her 30 days to vacate. Rowena read it, standing at the front of the shop, and the colour went out of the morning. "He can't," she said. "He can," Jasper said from behind her. The old man's face was the grey of old-type metal. "It's in the clause. He's been waiting for a reason, miss. He has one now." She looked at Alistair. He was already reading over her shoulder, jaw tight at the clause, and he said, too quickly, "I'll find a way to fix this." Not "I'll try," not "we'll see." The certainty of a man describing something he already knows how to do. "You'll fix it," she said. She stared at him. "A travelling compositor with a knapsack and watchmaker's tools. You'll fix a property syndicate in 30 days. How?" He had no answer that was not the truth. So he said, "Trust me." And the pause where the answer should have been opened the first real crack between them, and she felt it, and she said nothing. That evening, Jasper found her in the alley and told her about the letter. He had seen Alistair post it. He had seen the seal pressed into dark wax, a crest, the kind that did not belong on any journeyman's correspondence in any city in the country. Rowena stood in the alley and felt the drawer fall open all at once. The precision tools, the French, the dancing, the way he'd handled the Latin in her legal type blocks, reading them as naturally as she read English. The flinch at the fairground, the half-beat pause where his surname should have been, the sealed letter with a great man's mark. Each thing alone she had explained away. Together they made a shape, and she did not need to know its name to know it was a lie, and she did not need to know how long it had run to know it had run long enough to matter. She confronted him that night, plainly because she did everything plainly, in the shop with one lamp between them. "Jasper saw the seal," she said. "A crest. Tell me what you are." The truth came all the way to the front of him and stopped. He asked for 3 days. He said the lease would be resolved, and the truth would be told, and she could decide what to do with him after. She should have said no. Every practical instinct she had told her to put him out the door and face Drummond alone with her eyes open, but she had kissed him by a dying lamp and meant it all the way down, so she gave him the 3 days, and that was the trust the following afternoon destroyed. It was the harvest supper. Half the town gathered in the shop's back room, the way Bernard had always opened the place in October. Bread made from her own flour order, cider from the Arsenal farm, Clem running wild with the neighbours' children. For 1 hour the lease and the clause and 30 days were set aside. Alistair was beside her at the long table, sleeves rolled, and she had almost, let the patience of the last 3 days soften back into the old ease when she felt him go still. She knew that stillness now. A carriage had come up Dock Street, black, lacquered, 4 horses, a coat of arms on the door, catching the late afternoon light and throwing it back. The kind of vehicle that had never once come to this end of Hartwell Cove. The room went quiet by degrees, the way a room does when something enters that doesn't belong. A man stepped out, slim, immaculate, wearing the expression of someone mildly inconvenienced for several months and intending the room to know it. He looked over the supper crowd with the measuring eye of a man who has assigned monetary values to rooms all his life, and then found Alistair's face in the crowd and let something satisfied move across his own. "Good Lord," he said into the quiet. He did not lower his voice. He pitched it to Carrie. "There you actually are. Your Grace, this has gone on quite long enough. I have spent the better part of 2 months and a considerable sum tracking you across the Maritimes. Your solicitor is beside himself. Your tenants have 3 outstanding disputes, and your aunt has written me 7 letters, each less patient than the last." A pause, allowing the room its moment. "Do come home. The Marquessate rather requires its Marquess." The title went through the room like cold water through a gate. Rowena turned to look at Alistair, to share the strangeness of it, to ask who is this man, and saw his face and understood everything at once before a single word of explanation was offered. He stood among the print tables with his sleeves still rolled, his face stripped completely open in something she had never seen on him before, which was pure dread, and he was not looking at the man who had announced him. He was looking at her. "His name," the slim man continued, feeding on the attention she saw. "This was a man who lived inside the reactions of rooms, is Alistair Doyle Thorne, Marquess of Thornfield. He is my cousin. He is worth, I should estimate, rather more than this entire county and its harbour, and he has spent your autumn, my friends, playing at poverty in your very charming print shop." He let the moment hold. "Have you been paying him wages? Oh, I do hope you've been paying him wages." The room made a sound. She watched it move across the faces around her. Jasper's jaw going hard. Clem's face going blank with the particular blankness of a 16-year-old confronting something too large. Drummond, who had materialized at the edge of the gathering, lighting up with the exact expression of a man just dealt the hand he needed. And she stood in the middle of it, in her work dress with ink on her cuff, the widow who had hired a marquess for compositor's wages and shown him her ruin by lamplight and kissed him by a dying fire and given him 3 days against her own better judgment. She felt the whole room's eyes move from him to her. The slim man found her now. He looked her over with a single smooth assessment that found her wanting before he finished the pass. "Though I must say, Alistair, a print shop widow." He managed to make it sound like fond exasperation. "You always were sentimental. It hardly matters. Your promise to the Langford girl, practically settled. So you'll forgive me, my dear Mrs. Finch, if I retrieve him. You may keep the press." There it all was, the tools, the French, the dancing, the sealed letter, the "I'll fix it," said with perfect confidence. Every one of them reprised in the space of a minute. Not mysteries, tells, the tells of a man who had never truly been without resources, warming himself at someone else's fire on his way through. She did not cry. She set down the bread she was holding. She wiped her hands on her apron, once and then again, and the room waited. "Alistair," she said, "is it true? Are you the Marquess of Thornfield?" "Yes, just that," no apology folded in to soften it. "And you read my ledger, knowing what you were?" "Yes." "And the sealed letters were to your solicitor, to fix the lease with your money, without telling me?" A pause. "Yes." She looked at him for a long moment. His face was open in a way she had not seen it open before, stripped all the way down, and it was the worst thing she had looked at, because it made it harder to say what she was going to say, and she said it anyway. "Then go home, Your Grace. You have a carriage and a cousin and an almost settled fiancé and an estate that requires you." Her voice did not rise, it did not need to. "And I have a shop and a brother and 30 days to save both, none of which have anything to do with Marquesses. If there was anything true between us this autumn, you'll do me the one kindness of not making me watch you explain it. Just go." The cousin made a satisfied gesture toward the carriage. Alistair looked at her for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then he said quietly, for her alone though the room was straining, "You're owed the truth, and I'll give it to you. Not here, not like this, with him enjoying it. You don't deserve to have it this way." He looked at his cousin once, and the quality of it made the man's expression slip just slightly. "I'm leaving because she asked me to. Mark the reason. It is entirely that and nothing else." He picked up his coat from the peg by the door. He walked past the black lacquered carriage without getting into it, and went down Dock Street on foot, the way he had come up it, a Marquess with a knapsack. Behind him, Rowena Finch stood very straight among the print tables, and did not cry until the last wheel sound had faded from the street. 3 weeks passed, and they were the hardest 3 weeks she had known since February. She worked the press herself. She rose earlier. She slept worse. The town, having recalibrated the Marquess, set about recalibrating her, and the two stories that circulated were the fool who'd been deceived and the schemer who'd nearly hooked a title and missed, and the second spread faster because it was crueler, and people are like water. They find the easiest channel. He had left a letter with Jasper. The old man had pressed it into her hand the morning after, reluctantly said the Marquess had handed it to him on his way out and made him swear to deliver it. It sat on the composing table, sealed with plain wax. No crest, she noticed. Even in leaving, he had tried to come to her as the man and not the title. She looked at it for 2 weeks. On the worst night, she put it in the wood stove and sat on the floor and cried, because she would never know now what it said, and regretting it did not bring it back. Clem found her there. He sat down beside her without being asked. "Why would a Marquess clean the roller journals?" he said to the stove. "If he was only amusing himself. You don't do the worst jobs for 6 weeks because you're bored. He taught me to set display type. Dukes don't teach compositing to nobodies. Why would he bother, if it was all a game to him?" She had no answer that didn't hurt, so she gave him none. Then 2 things happened in the same week. The first, Drummond's termination notice was suddenly bewilderingly withdrawn. The building lease had been purchased, paid in full through a Halifax solicitor, by an anonymous party. Finch Print Shop owned its building free and clear. Drummond had no further claim on anything. Rowena read the solicitor's letter for a long time. "He thinks he can buy his way back in," she told Jasper, her voice tight. "He thinks he can settle my debt and settle my pride in the same envelope and call it square. I am not a debt to be resolved. I would send it back if I could find where it came from, and not being able to send it back is its own particular humiliation." The second thing came up Dock Street 4 days later on foot, in excellent plain travelling clothes and leaning on a stick, a small, formidable woman with Alistair exact eyes and none of his patience, who marched into the shop and looked Rowena up and down once, thoroughly, and said, "So you're the printer who threw my nephew off her property? Good. I'd have thought less of you if you hadn't. Now is there tea, because I've come from Toronto and my knees have opinions about the road." Her name was Winifred. She was Alistair's father's sister, the only person in his entire adult life, she said, who had ever told him plainly when he was being an idiot, which meant she had been very busy. She drank her tea. She watched Rowena over the rim of the cup with eyes that catalogued everything without appearing to move. Then she set the cup down. "Cecil told you Alistair paid your lease to buy himself back into your good opinion," she said. "That is what you believe. Now listen, because I'm saying it once, and I have a connection to catch," she explained. Alistair had tried to buy the lease 6 weeks before the carriage came. 6 weeks while he was still the compositor, while Rowena still thought him nobody, when there was no lie to undo, no public scene to repair, no favour to return. He had done it through Alderton in secret, expecting precisely nothing in return. No gratitude, no acknowledgement, no change in how she looked at him across the supper table. He had intended her to never know it was him. He had intended to fix the problem and quietly remove himself from it. "The dates are in Alderton's records," Winifred said. "You may see them with your own eyes if you think old women lie." She paused. "There is more, and this is the part you need most. The Langford arrangement. Cecil told you it was all but settled. It was settled on Cecil's end. He had arranged it without Alistair's knowledge to secure funds that would flow partially through accounts Cecil manages. Alistair refused it, flatly, in writing to Cecil's face after he left here. He said he would lose Thornfield to the last acre before he married to order." Winifred set down her cup. "He has gone back to the estate to manage the consequences of that refusal alone. He did not tell you about it because he did not want to make his problems yours. He paid your debt before there was any lie to repair because he could not bear to watch you lose the shop. He refused a fortune and told no one why." The fire ticked. In the back room, Clem was setting type, the small measured sounds of someone learning. "It doesn't change what I am," Rowena said at last. Her voice was steady. "Even if every word of that is true. I'm a printer in Hartwell Cove. I have ink under my nails and a brother to raise and a press to run. I will not be a Marquess's kept secret, visited between seasons. I will not be his charitable act dressed as a wife. I would rather have nothing than be diminished by it." She gathered the cups. "I'll thank you for the truth. I'll keep my shop. I'll stay where I belong." Winifred looked at her for a long moment. Something moved in the sharp old face, not quite warmth, but its close relative. "You're not wrong to want your own terms," she said, rising. "I shan't argue you out of your pride. I rather like it." She reached for her stick and her hat. "I'll only say this for nothing. The two of you are each waiting for the other one to cross first. He won't ask you to be a marchioness. You won't go and be made small. So you'll each be very correct and very alone until something comes along larger than both your positions put together." She paused at the door. "In my experience, something always does. Mind your lamp wicks this time of year. Old presses and turpentine are not a patient combination." And she went. Rowena stood in the doorway watching the small, fierce figure go down the lane, and did not yet know the old woman had, without intending to, named the exact thing that was coming. The fire started on a Thursday past midnight. The turpentine had been on the low shelf, where Bernard had always kept it, where she had always kept it, where it had never once been a problem. What had never happened before was Clem knocking it in the dark, and what had never happened before was the lamp being close enough to the spill to matter. She smelled it before she saw it. She came downstairs with the cold clarity that sometimes arrives in the worst moments, when the body understands the situation before the mind does, and she saw the fire running along the base of the wall toward the press, and understood in the same instant that Clem was still in the back room. What happened next she remembered in pieces rather than sequence: the cold of the floor, the weight of the bucket. Clem's voice, high and frightened, and then the sound of the front door opening, a sound she had not made, and then Alistair was there. He had ridden through the night. Word had reached Thornfield through someone who knew someone, a letter from Jasper to a cousin in Halifax who had a connection north. He had read it and been on a horse before he'd finished reading, 6 hours of November Road in the dark, and he arrived at Finch print shop with no crest and no announcement and no footman, and he went straight for Clem and then straight for the press. He knew how to manage it. That was the thing she understood afterward. He had a printing house at Thornfield, had restored it 3 years before, and in the restoration had learned exactly how a print shop fire behaves, how the ink-soaked rollers catch, what kills the burn before it reaches the frame. He worked it the way he had worked the cylinder alignment, not fighting it, reading it, finding the axis of it, and applying exactly the right pressure at exactly the right place. A skill from the very first week, from the first hour she had watched him, all of it paying off in the one night it was ever truly needed. It took an hour. When it was done, the press was intact. The walls were scorched, but standing. Clem was in the street, wrapped in a neighbour's coat, and Alistair was sitting on the stone step in the freezing dark and looking at his hands. She sat down beside him. For a while neither of them said anything. The street was quiet. The harbour smell came in cold from the east. "You came back," she said. "I heard the shop was on fire," he said. "I didn't think about it. I was on the horse before I finished the letter." He turned to look at her. "I'd have come if Jasper had met me at the town line with a gun, Rowena. You should probably know that." The harbour was going silver in the very first grey before dawn. "I owe you the truth," he said. "You said not like that, with Cecil enjoying it. He's not here. So here it is, and it's 3 things. She let him say them. She listened to all 3. The first, he had run from Thornfield because he had been a Marquess since he was 21, and a man to no one ever, and he had wanted to know what it felt like to be wanted plainly. That was vanity, he said, and he wasn't proud of it. The second, he had tried to buy the lease 6 weeks before the carriage came, before there was any lie to undo. Because he could not bear to watch Drummond take the shop, and he knew she would never let him give her a thing. He had meant for her to never know it was him. That was cowardice dressed as kindness, he said, and it had cost them both. He stopped. His voice went quiet under the sound of the falling tide. The third thing is the only one that matters, and it's the one Cecil made ugly when it isn't. There is no Langford engagement. There was never going to be one. I refused it in writing to Cecil's face after I left here. I would lose Thornfield to the last acre before I married to order. He looked at her, ruined and freezing, and absolutely steady. There's no one settled elsewhere. There won't be. I lied about my name. I never once lied about wanting you. Not on any night, not in any hour of this entire autumn. The name was false. Everything underneath it was true. That's all 3. The dawn came up over the harbour in long, thin lines of pale light. Rowena looked at the man who had ridden 6 hours in the dark for a press that wasn't his, who had arrived with no announcement and gone straight to work, who had refused a fortune and asked nothing, and come back in the first hour she was in danger. She did not forgive him because he was a Marquess. She forgave him because he had come back as a man and put his hands on the problem. "Here are my terms," she said. Her voice was the plain, flat voice she used for the things she meant all the way through. "They're not open for negotiation. I will not be kept in Hartwell Cove and visited between seasons. I will not be a titles charity case taken up because he felt the want of being good for once. If you want me, you have me as a partner. My name stays on that door. I run the press, and I keep the books, and I make my own decisions. You'll have me on the same level you found me on, or you won't have me, Your Grace, and I'll mean it exactly the way I meant get out of my shop." "On the level I found you on," he said. "Quiet and absolutely certain. Yes, that's the only level I ever was real." She kissed him then, on a stone step in the grey November dawn, covered in soot, with the harbour smell cold around them, and the press intact behind them, and not one witness but the gulls going over, and neither of them was sure afterward which of them had moved first, and it did not matter, because for once in both their lives it was entirely, exactly equal. The rest came out in the daylight, the way justice comes in small towns, in pieces, and then all at once. Drummond had been running the same scheme across 4 counties. The syndicate he chaired held leases on 11 small businesses. He had written the same termination clause into every contract, waited for recovery, and moved when the value was highest. Alderton, Alistair's man of business, had pulled the whole thread when he was acquiring the Finch lease, and what he found went to the provincial court, and, because the Marquess of Thornfield understood how attention worked when he chose to use it, to the Halifax newspaper as well. 11 leases were voided in open session. Restitution was ordered against everyone. Drummond left Hartwell Cove owing money in 4 directions and collecting sympathy in none. Cecil Langford went back to Toronto with his arranged marriage dissolved and his managed accounts under scrutiny. He departed considerably lighter than he had arrived and made no public farewell. Spring came to the harbour and the press ran straight. It ran straight and fast, the Finch press, because it was a partnership now. One partner who understood the mechanical logic in terms of natural philosophy, and one who understood it in terms of having grown up beside one. And between them, they produced the finest print work between Halifax and St. John, and had a 6-month backlog to prove it. The sign on the door still said Finch. Below it, in a smaller hand, in type they had set together, it said and Thorne. Jasper had complained about the kerning on the ampersand for 2 weeks, and then quietly reset it himself when he thought no one was watching, which was how Jasper expressed approval. Clem was apprenticed to a naval architect in the spring, and came home Sundays talking about hull ratios, with the total conviction of a 17-year-old who has found his calling and intends everyone to share in it. Winifred had taken rooms at the new hotel on Dock Street, announced that Toronto winters had become insupportable, and proceeded to reorganize the hotel's breakfast service to her satisfaction and the management's resignation. Alistair split his time between Thornfield and Hartwell Cove. He reformed the estate the way he had learned to do everything that had ever mattered to him since October. Hands first, understanding the problem before proposing the solution, to the considerable bewilderment of stewards who had expected their Marquess to arrive by carriage and rule by decree. The tenants, who had been entries in a ledger, were learning the shape of a landlord who came and looked at the gate himself. He asked her on the dock in early April, at first light, with the tide coming in, and the press already running behind them, and his hands carrying the ink smell that was, she had decided, as fine a thing as any she knew. He did not offer her a title. He was too sensible for that. "I'm not offering you a great house," he said. "You'd find 14 things to reorganize before the first week was out, and I wouldn't hear the end of it, and I would be right not to. I'm offering you the thing we already have, equal shares, equal say, your name first on the door. Marry me on the terms you named, as a partner, on the level I found you on. For every year both of us have left," he paused, and the dry quality she had loved before she knew anything else about him came back into his voice. "I considered getting down on one knee, but the dock is covered in fish scales and you'd never let me forget it." "You'd have ruined a good pair of trousers," she said. "You taught me better than to do that for a gesture." "I did," she said, "yes." She said it the way she said everything true, plainly, without flourish, meaning it all the way down, and the tide came in over the dock, and the press ran behind them, and the gulls went over, and neither of them was keeping score any more, which was the entire point of the thing. Here, in the end, is the whole of what happened at Hartwell Cove, and it is the thing worth carrying out of it. A title can be worn like a coat, and a name can be borrowed, and a fortune can be folded into a knapsack. But the way a person works when no one is watching, the way they treat a 16-year-old boy who is nobody to them, the way they reach for the problem in the moment of crisis, without being asked, that cannot be manufactured, and it cannot be bought. And in the long account of a life, it is worth more than every coat of arms on every carriage door in the country. She hired him for wages he did not need. He was worth a county. The only wealth either of them ever found was the one they built together, in the ink smell and the press sound, and the level place where neither rank nor ruin could follow them in.